My name is Layla Reynolds, and at 35 I've learned that a flawless lawn doesn't mean flawless neighbors. I live in Willow Creek Estates, one of those picture-perfect Colorado subdivisions where every house looks like it was stamped from the same mold, and the HOA rules are thicker than the homeowner handbook nobody actually reads. I work in the legal department of a real estate firm in Denver, drafting contracts and spotting loopholes for a living, which, funny enough, turned out to be perfect training for the nightmare happening right outside my front door. For 5 straight years, I've been the model resident everyone pretended to love. When Karen Simmons, our beloved HOA president, cited board meetings about budget shortfalls or emergency landscaping needs, I quietly wrote checks from my own account. I told myself it was community spirit. Turns out I was just their walking ATM with good credit. The first crack in the perfect picket fence showed up on a random Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing a title dispute at work. My phone buzzed with a fraud alert. Someone had applied for a credit card in my name, and it was already maxed out at $3,000. The billing address listed? Not my house on Maple Lane, but 1422 Crestview Drive, the Simmons residence, right at the center of the HOA kingdom. My stomach dropped like I'd swallowed a cinder block. I called the card company, verified my identity 6 different ways, and listened as the rep read off purchases I'd never made. High-end patio furniture, a built-in barbecue grill big enough to roast a whole neighborhood, and landscaping services that somehow ended up at Karen's backyard oasis. I didn't scream. I didn't blast it on the Willow Creek Facebook page like half the residents would have. Instead, I made coffee, opened my laptop, and started documenting everything like it was a multi-million-dollar lawsuit at the firm. Screenshots, transaction logs, IP addresses tracing straight back to the HOA office computer they all shared. Underneath the calm, I felt something sharper than anger. 16 years of being the reliable one in every room had finally crystallized into cold, diamond-hard clarity. They didn't see me as a neighbor. They saw me as a resource with a pulse. My phone rang while I was still compiling evidence. Karen's number, of course. "Layla, darling," she cooed in that syrupy voice she reserved for board meetings and neighbor complaints. "We're having the annual summer potluck this Sunday at the clubhouse. Tessa has some exciting updates on the new community projects. We'd really love for you to be there. Your input is always so valuable." I stared at the credit card statement glowing on my screen, the one showing a $4,200 delivery of outdoor lighting that now twinkled around Karen's pool. "I'll be there," I answered, voice steady as granite. Wouldn't miss it for the world. She kept chattering about how the neighborhood was family and how we all had to pull together. I let her talk while I took silent screenshots of every lie. Sunday arrived crisp and bright, the kind of Colorado morning that usually made the mountains look postcard perfect. Not today. I dressed in my best professional but approachable outfit, the one that screamed competent neighbor, not easy mark. The drive to the clubhouse took 5 minutes, but every second felt like another mile of buried resentment. The parking lot was already full of shiny SUVs and minivans sporting Willow Creek stickers. Tessa's new Tesla sat front and center, a car she definitely couldn't afford on her part-time social media influencer salary. Another puzzle piece clicked. Karen rushed out the moment I stepped from my car, arms wide like we were long-lost sisters. "Layla, you look wonderful. Still working too hard, I bet." Her hug smelled like artificial vanilla and desperation. Inside, the clubhouse smelled of barbecue and hidden agendas. Frank, Karen's husband and HOA treasurer, lounged in the big recliner by the window, beer in hand, watching the football game on the community TV. He stood when he saw me, hug brief and awkward. "Good to see you, kiddo." Looking prosperous as always. That word hung in the air like a price tag. Tessa emerged from the kitchen wearing faded jeans and a messy bun, playing the struggling but hopeful board secretary perfectly. "Hey sis, a neighbor," she chirped, smile a shade too bright. We gathered around the long tables loaded with casseroles and store-bought pies. Karen had outdone herself. Cloth napkins, HOA branded plates, the whole theater. Frank cleared his throat after the salads were passed. Tessa, why don't you tell Layla about the new community enhancement project? Here it came. Tessa launched into a rehearsed pitch about an exclusive residence lounge with projected revenues and slides on her phone. What she didn't mention was the inventory already purchased on my dime. We just need a little initial capital, she said, eyes wide with practiced sincerity. $25,000 would cover the upgrades for the first 6 months. That's quite the investment, I replied, slicing my grilled chicken with deliberate calm. Karen jumped in, voice dripping honey. Show her the spreadsheets, honey. We've done all the research. More props appeared, graphs, competitor analyses, market projections for community value. They prepared like it was a military op. Everyone played their part. Frank nodding sagely, Karen beaming with maternal pride for the whole neighborhood. I let them finish, then said quietly, impressive. But I have a personal rule. I don't mix my finances with HOA business. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Karen's smile flickered. Rules? Layla, dear, we're a community here. Family helps family. The word family tasted like spoiled milk. I took a slow sip of water. Like how you help yourself to my credit cards? Tessa's face went white. I continued conversationally, voice never rising. The applications were submitted from the HOA office IP. The delivery addresses for all that patio furniture? Your house, Karen. The barbecue grill big enough for a block party? Also yours. Frank's beer bottle slipped. Karen recovered first, tears appearing on cue. How can you accuse us of something so horrible? We're your neighbors. I stood up slowly. No, you're people who happen to share a zip code. There's a difference. The silence that followed was delicious. They wanted more of my money. I served them consequences instead. And the pie I'd brought? That was just the beginning of their dessert. The drive home passed in a blur of calculated fury. By the time I pulled in my driveway, I'd already made 3 calls. First to Marcus, the IT security guy who'd helped my firm with a data breach last year. Second to my own lawyer, Sandra Chun. Third to my bank to freeze everything. I met Marcus the next morning at our usual coffee shop near the highway. He pulled out his laptop with the gentle eyes of someone who'd seen too many family disasters. This is HOA related, isn't it? He asked softly. Just tell me how bad it is. It was worse. Over 4 hours, he uncovered a web that stretched back 2 years. The 3 credit cards were only the latest. There were utility accounts opened in my name, a cell phone plan with 4 lines, even an attempt to refinance the HOA's emergency reserve loan using my credit history. All of it traced to the clubhouse computer or Karen's personal laptop. Marcus showed me a timeline. They've been testing boundaries, seeing what they could get away with. The cards were supposed to be the big score before you noticed. Total active fraud, 18,000. Attempted, close to 200,000 if that loan had gone through. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. Then I felt something inside me lock into place, diamond hard resolve. Can you trace the digital signatures? Prove who did what? Marcus nodded. Already did. Tessa was sloppy, used her own email as recovery for 1 card. The loan attempt needed someone with access to your tax returns and employment files. That points straight to Frank. He keeps all the HOA records at their house. That evening I sat with Sandra in her office overlooking the city lights. Identity theft is a federal crime, she said, flipping through Marcus's report. With this documentation, prosecution is straightforward. But they're your neighbors, I finished her thought. I know. What I want is justice, restitution, and a message loud enough that every petty HOA in Colorado hears it. Sandra smiled, sharp as a blade. Then let's discuss your options. Over the next week, I moved with surgical precision. I filed fraud reports with all 3 credit bureaus, locking my credit tighter than Fort Knox. I canceled every automatic transfer I'd ever set up to cover HOA shortfalls, the ones I've been quietly paying for years after their temporary budget crises. I also created a small trust fund accessible only for genuine medical emergencies or education for any resident under 18. Not for Karen's pool parties. Not for Tessa's influencer dreams, just for kids who might need what I never had, someone looking out without strings. The call started Wednesday. First Karen, sobbing about betrayal and how the neighborhood was falling apart without community support. Then Tessa, cycling between rage and manipulation. You're destroying the whole board's reputation. Followed by, I'm sorry, I was desperate. Frank left voicemails about misunderstandings and working things out like adults. I responded to none of them. Instead, I prepared for the next potluck, the one I'd quietly suggested we hold in 2 weeks to discuss the future of Willow Creek. Marcus compiled everything into a sleek presentation. Sandra drafted the cease and desist. I even recorded every conversation since the fraud alert. Colorado is one-party consent, and their own words were gold. By Saturday night, my tablet was loaded, my evidence airtight, and on my kitchen counter sat the masterpiece, my late grandmother's apple pie. Golden crust gleaming, the one recipe I'd kept from the side of the family the HOA never knew about. They wanted a community dinner. They were about to get one they'd never forget. Sunday arrived with that same crisp Colorado sun. I woke at 6:30, reviewed my materials one final time, and carried the pie like a Trojan horse made of apples and spite. I arrived at the clubhouse precisely at 5 p.m., pie in one hand, leather portfolio in the other. The entire board was already arranged in the living room like a greeting committee or an intervention. Karen rose, arms outstretched. I sidestepped her hug. I brought dessert, I said, handing the pie to Frank. He took it automatically, looking confused. That's thoughtful, Karen managed. The dinner was a masterclass in awkward theater. Karen served my childhood favorite sides, clearly following a script titled, How to Manipulate Your Favorite Cash Cow Through Nostalgia. Conversation stayed light, weather, lawn complaints, anything but the elephant wearing my social security number. Tessa barely looked at me, pushing food around her plate like a sullen teenager who'd been caught stealing. When the main course was cleared, Frank cleared his throat. So, Layla, have you given any more thought to supporting the Community Enhancement Fund? I smiled pleasantly. I have. But let's save business talk for after dessert. Karen sliced the pie with reverence, usually reserved for communion. I remember when your grandmother used to make something similar, she said softly. Such wonderful memories. I accepted my slice. Funny how memories work. Some people remember things very differently than they actually happened. The pie was perfect. They ate in silence, forks scraping plates, tension thick enough to cut with the HOA's own ridiculous lawn height ruler. When the last bite disappeared, I opened my portfolio. Before we begin, Karen said carefully, I want you to know we're prepared to forgive. I laughed, short and bright. Forgive me? For what exactly? The accusations. Tessa jumped in, voice shaky. It was a misunderstanding. We thought you'd offer to help with the projects. I pulled out the tablet. Let's clear up some misunderstandings. First slide, the fraudulent credit applications, IP addresses traced to the clubhouse computer. Tessa's face drained of color. Second slide, the purchases 70-inch TVs, trips disguised as board retreats, all the luxury items now sitting in Karen's backyard. I'm not finished, I said conversationally. Third slide, the attempted HOA loan refinance using my credit. This was my favorite. Karen, did you know impersonating someone for financial gain is a federal crime carrying up to 30 years? Frank's face went gray. Now for the audio portion. I hit play. Tessa's voice filled the room, admitting the theft. Then Frank coaching her on what to say. Then Karen and Tessa discussing how to maximize Layla's generosity during my next visit. With every recording, they shrank further into their chairs. Karen's tears had dried up. Tessa stared at her hands. Frank looked ready to vomit. But wait, I said, channeling every late-night infomercial. There's more. Final slides showed the cease and desist letters, the fraud reports already filed, the criminal complaints ready to go. My lawyer says with this evidence conviction is guaranteed. Identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy. You've hit the criminal trifecta. Karen whispered, "You wouldn't. We're neighbors." "No," I answered. "You're criminals who happen to share a zip code." I closed the portfolio. "But I'm willing to make a deal. Drop all claims to any relationship with me. No contact, no calls, no showing up at my door with more community projects. You forget I exist, and I forget to file these complaints." Tessa shrieked, "That's blackmail." "No," I said, gathering my things, "that's consequences." As I reached the door, Karen called out, "What about forgiveness? What about second chances?" I turned back, meeting each of their eyes. "I forgave you the first time you took advantage. And the second. And the 100th. This isn't about forgiveness anymore. It's about self-preservation." I walked out, leaving 16 years of obligation, manipulation, and one-sided community spirit smoldering behind me. The Colorado night air felt crisp and clean, like freedom tastes. Behind me, I heard Karen sobbing, Tessa screaming, Frank trying to establish order. But I didn't look back. Some bridges are meant to burn, and some neighborhoods are meant to lose their cash cow. Monday morning brought 17 missed calls and 43 texts. I deleted them all unread. Sipping coffee while watching the mountains turn gold, I felt lighter than I had in years. Sandra called at 8:30 sharp. They've been trying to reach me since 6. Frank left 3 voicemails threatening to sue for defamation. "With what money?" I asked. "The loan they try to take out in my name?" She laughed. "Exactly what I told him. They're asking for a meeting." 48 hours means 48 hours, I said. At 2:15 p.m., Tessa showed up at my office building. Security called up. I placed every board member on the do not admit list that morning. "Tell her she's trespassing," I instructed. "If she doesn't leave, call the police." I watched from my window as she paced for 20 minutes before a guard escorted her off the property. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Tessa on Kim's phone. Please just talk to me. I'm desperate." I blocked it too. Tuesday brought escalation. Karen tried to access my medical insurance, claiming a family emergency. The insurance company called to verify. I confirmed attempted identity theft and asked them to document everything. Wednesday, the 48 hours expired. Sandra had everything ready: criminal complaints, civil suit paperwork, even a restraining order template. At 4:58 p.m., her phone rang. She put on speaker. "Mr. Simmons, I have Layla here. You're on speaker." Frank's voice sounded broken, aged a decade in 2 days. "Don't file anything. We agree to your terms." "All of you?" I asked. "Yes." Karen, Tessa, the whole board. "And the financial damages?" Sandra added, "We'll figure payment plans." "Frank's taking out a home equity loan." "Fine. Whatever you want." I nodded to Sandra. She emailed the formal paperwork. All parties sign and return within 24 hours. Any violation, and we file everything. Frank's voice cracked. "We understand." I leaned toward the phone. "This is the last time you'll hear my voice. I didn't do this because I'm cruel. I did it because for 5 years I confused enabling with community spirit. You taught me that resources can be cut off." Sandra ended the call. Thursday and Friday passed in productive silence. The signed agreements arrived, notarized, and complete. The first restitution payment hit my account. Frank's contribution, probably from that home equity loan I'd forced. I donated every cent to a local charity that helped identity theft victims. Saturday morning brought an unexpected email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, "Please read, from someone who understands." It was from my cousin Emma in Oregon. We'd barely spoken since childhood. "Layla, I heard it happened. I'm not writing to change your mind. I'm writing to say thank you. They tried the same thing with me 5 years ago when I started my tech job. Small requests at first, then bigger. Dad found my checkbook during a visit. I caught it early, but the betrayal, I know exactly how you feel. I've been no contact for 3 years. Best decision I ever made. You're not cruel. You're a survivor." I read it twice, then saved it to a folder labeled New Beginnings. That evening, I made myself dinner in my quiet house. No leftovers, no takeout, just a real meal for one. As I ate, I looked around at my space, my things, my life built on my own terms. No HOA dues funneled into Karen's pool. No board members calculating my worth in dollar signs. My phone sat silent on the counter. For the first time in 5 years, I was truly free. And that freedom tasted better than any community potluck ever could. 3 months passed in blissful silence. The restitution payments arrived monthly, processed through Sandra's office to keep the no-contact wall intact. I changed my routines. New gym, different grocery store, altered routes to work. Not from fear, but from a desire to close the chapter completely. Then on a Thursday in November, everything shifted again. Marcus called at 3:45 p.m. "Layla, sorry to bother you, but something came up in my routine monitoring. Someone's been digging into your background." My blood chilled. The board? No. A licensed private investigator. Query started 2 weeks ago. I met him at the coffee shop an hour later. He showed me the digital footprints, employment history, property records, even my volunteer work at Legal Aid. Any idea who hired them? I asked. The billing traces to a law firm in Kansas City, Howard Son and Associates. They specialize in estate law. My mind raced. My maternal grandmother, Eleanor Hastings, the woman my father's side had painted as dead for decades. She'd been old Kansas City money and had viewed the entire Willow Creek crowd as gold diggers the moment they moved in. That evening my phone rang. Kansas City area code. MS. Reynolds? Janet Howard's son. I apologize for the late hour, but I've been trying to locate you for 2 weeks. She got straight to it. My grandmother had died last month at 93. And she left me everything: the estate, investments, family trust. Current value, approximately $12 million. I set my coffee down carefully. That's impossible. She hated my father's side. Janet's voice softened. She never hated you. In fact, she's been watching from afar, waiting for you to break free from what she called that parasitic homeowners association. Your cousin Emma kept her updated. Eleanor updated her, last year after hearing about the identity theft. She died knowing you'd finally seen them clearly. The will was ironclad. Multiple witnesses, video, testimony, psychiatric evaluations. It even included a provision. If any member of the Willow Creek board contested or tried to claim a portion, $100,000 would be donated to identity theft charities in their name. I laughed out loud. She had thought of everything. Janet promised to email the documents. After the call, I sat in my living room staring at the mountains fading into darkness. My grandmother, a woman I'd been told was dead, had been protecting me the whole time. $12 million was more money than I could picture, but it wasn't the cash that moved me. It was the validation that my instincts had been right all along. Walking away wasn't cruelty, it was wisdom. The news of my inheritance spread faster than a new HOA fine. I'd been careful, telling only my boss I needed time off for estate matters. But money has a way of announcing itself when property transfers hit public record. The first breach came 2 weeks later. I was reading my grandmother's journals, 30 leather-bound volumes that painted the real story of a woman who'd loved fiercely and lost tragically, when my doorbell rang at 8:45 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw an enormous bouquet of white roses, my mother's favorite. I hadn't ordered flowers. The card was unsigned, but the handwriting was unmistakable, Karen's perfect cursive. Thinking of you during this difficult time of loss. They knew. I photographed everything and forwarded it to Sandra. Her reply was instant. Document. This is indirect contact. The next morning, Tessa viewed my LinkedIn profile. Then a connection request from Teresa Simmons Williams. New last name, professional headshot, bio bragging about her successful community consulting business. I screenshot it all, adding to the growing file. Wednesday brought a more creative attempt. My office received a call from a potential client needing help with a family property dispute involving inheritance. The callback number traced straight to Frank's cell. They were testing boundaries, seeing what they could get away with without technically violating the agreement. That evening I called Emma. They've been calling me nonstop, she said. Frank even showed up at my office in Portland. I told them the truth. I don't know anything, and they should respect the no-contact order. Dad called me a traitor. She laughed bitterly. At least now I'm not alone. She was right. Friday afternoon, the real assault began. First, a letter from a legitimate law firm suggesting undue influence had been exerted on my grandmother's will. Janet Howard's son explained they couldn't contest directly because of the charitable clause, so they were trying a separate civil suit. They have zero grounds, she said. Eleanor was examined by 3 psychiatrists. This is pure harassment. Then came the social media wave. My private Instagram flooded with follow requests from fake accounts using old family photos. Tessa posted long passages about family forgiveness and the tragedy of greed tearing neighborhoods apart. Karen joined in with posts about the daughter she'd raised as her own, who'd chosen money over community. Dad, Frank, wrote a LinkedIn article about the importance of neighborhood values with veiled references to ungrateful residents who forget their roots. My colleagues started asking subtle questions. The security guard mentioned that article about ungrateful kids he'd read. They were trying to make me radioactive. That night, I sat with my grandmother's journals and read her entry from the day after my mother's funeral. They'll come for Layla eventually, not out of love, but greed. The vultures are already circling. She had seen this coming 28 years ago. I pulled out my laptop and built a website. The real story of Willow Creek corruption. Clean design, every piece of evidence, police reports, credit statements, audio recordings, restitution payments proving they'd admitted guilt. The centerpiece was my grandmother's journal entries, exposing how the board had manipulated finances even before my mother died. I launched it Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. with a simple post. Since the board has chosen to make our private matters public, here's the truth they don't want you to know. By Monday morning, it had gone viral in the local community. The same neighbors who'd offered prayers on Tessa's posts were now sharing mine, with captions like, OMG, they stole her identity. Tessa's influencer image crumbled. Karen's community first act fell apart as the recordings played her calculating how much more they could extract. Frank's LinkedIn article became a monument to hypocrisy. Tuesday, I held a press conference at Sandra's office. Local media ate up the identity theft with a neighborhood twist. I dressed in my grandmother's elegant style and looked straight into the cameras. I'm not here to destroy the board. They did that themselves. I'm here to warn others that sometimes the greatest threat comes from the people who claim to love your neighborhood most. I announced the Eleanor Hastings Foundation for Identity Theft Victims, funded with $5 million from the inheritance. The questions flew. When asked about reconciliation, I was clear. You can't reconcile with people who see you as an ATM. You can only protect yourself and hope they learn. Wednesday brought cease and desist letters about the website. Sandra answered with one line. Truth is an absolute defense. Every document is authenticated. Proceed at your own risk. They didn't. By Thursday, the board had gone dark. Social media deleted, profiles private. Other stories surfaced. Emma came forward. 2 distant neighbors reached out with similar tales. My grandmother had been right. I wasn't the first victim, just the first to fight back publicly. 1 month later, I stood in my grandmother's Kansas City estate, my estate now. The house was a testament to old money managed wisely. Every room filled with photos of the daughter she'd lost and the granddaughter she'd protected from afar. In her study, I found the final journal entry written days before her death. Layla will read this someday when she's free. You have your mother's heart, but something she lacked, the strength to say no. I'm so proud of you for breaking the cycle. Use this inheritance not as a weapon, but as wings. Live the life your mother couldn't. Remember, community isn't about dues or rules. It's about who stands with you when standing with you offers them nothing but your company. Be gloriously, unapologetically free. I kept the estate as a retreat, but returned to Denver, to my life, my real friends, my work. The money changed my circumstances, but not my values. I still lived modestly, still work hard, still bake my grandmother's apple pie, but now I shared it with people who saw me as a person, not a pension plan. The board never contacted me again. The legal barriers held. More than that, I think they finally understood the well had run permanently dry. You can't manipulate someone who sees you clearly, and you can't drain someone who's learned to say no. 6 months after that final potluck, I received a wedding invitation from Emma. She'd found love with someone who valued her for herself, not her connections or potential financial benefit. I attended, bringing apple pie as my gift, and watched her dance with the kind of joy that comes from leaving toxicity behind. During the reception, she pulled me aside. You know what the best part is? I can love him without calculating the cost. I can give freely because I know he's not taking inventory. That's what freedom really looked like. Not the money, not the revenge, not even the justice. It was the ability to love without ledgers, to give without guilt, to receive without suspicion. As I drove home that night, Denver's lights twinkling below, I thought about my mother, my grandmother, and the chain of women who'd each fought this battle in their own way. My mother lost, my grandmother retreated, but I had broken free. And in breaking free, I discovered the ultimate truth. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a toxic neighborhood is to let it go. They'll survive or they won't. But either way, it's no longer your responsibility. My name is Layla Reynolds. I am 35 years old. I am nobody's HOA cash cow, nobody's emergency fund, nobody's community project. I am free, and that freedom is worth more than all the perfect lawns and power trips they try to steal. Thank you for listening to my story. Drop a comment below if you've ever battled an HOA Karen. Your stories matter too. If this resonated, hit subscribe and share. Let's keep exposing the Karens together.